So let's go ahead now and switch off the higher functioning regions of our brains and talk about the Fast and Furious franchise. You know, the one that started out as a simple street racing movie series and turned into a completely absurd, logic-defying, insultingly stupid action franchise that evolved to incorporate both the heist and spy genres and even went into space at one point. Villains in one film end up regularly becoming protagonists and even family by the end of the next one. Characters who've died in previous installments are usually retconned back to life more often than a bad daytime soap opera. Now, believe it or not, I do have some remaining fondness for the Fast and Furious franchise, in much the same way a person could be a fan of a heavyweight boxer who had a solid career, but unfortunately, he just couldn't take the hint and hang up the gloves and retire when he was at his prime. Now, he's a shadow of his former self. He loses regularly and is looking in pretty rough shape. It's painful to watch him fight now. Now, like many of you, I've watched the entire series of films, and I can conclude, as many longtime fans have, that the fifth film was the best, and the series should have ended with number 7, which was a fitting send-off for the late Paul Walker and his character, Brian O'Connor. Walker died, of course, during the making of that film, which was completed with the help of his two brothers, Cody and Caleb, as stand-ins, and also there was some pretty convincing CGI used as well. Unfortunately, the series limped on for 3 more movies and an atrocious spin-off called Hobbs and Shaw. The 10th film of the franchise, probably the worst, ended on a major cliffhanger. An 11th film is due out for April of 2027, which means there will be basically 4 years between the 10th film and the 11th, which I think is far too long to sustain any kind of tension or suspense for a cliffhanger. In fact, main star Vin Diesel wants the 11th film to go back to its roots of being a street racing series. But how? They have an entire cliffhanger to resolve and other plot threads to tie up. I mean, I guess they could just ignore the cliffhanger or even resolve it by using a bunch of flashbacks to kind of hand wave it away, maybe move forward in time a little bit. Given how awful the 10th film was, who would blame them? Anyway, part of me wonders if this 11th film will even happen. The film's already been delayed several times, and it sounds like they have some plot headaches to work out. But what we do know about the 11th film is that apparently the character of Brian O'Connor is coming back, which likely means CGI is going to have to be used to digitally resurrect Paul Walker. And they could just recast him, but it's likely they're going to go down the route that they did for number 7, which is using CGI. Now, if this is the case, I think it completely undermines the emotional and poignant send-off he got in Fast and Furious 7. Furthermore, I don't think many fans are going to want to see Brian return knowing that it's just CGI. This kind of thing doesn't sit well with many people. His character is technically still alive, but I think he's better left off screen. I'm not comfortable with dead actors being brought back like this, even with the blessing of their families. To me, that's not enough. If Paul Walker had consented to this before his death, that would be one thing. I could understand. But anyway, marketing a movie with the digital likeness of a dead person just doesn't sit right with me. But the longer the series has gone on, the more likely it became that this kind of thing was going to happen, even if it was just some kind of cameo capacity. As the technology to do this kind of stuff improves, the temptation for the filmmakers to do it only increases, especially considering it'll attract some longtime fans. AI, deepfakes, and of course AI voices are all vastly improved nowadays, but as you watch scenes with digital Paul Walker in Fast and Furious 11, I think there will be this kind of emptiness about it. You know, you're going to know that it's a trick, and even if it's just a little off, you're going to be spending the movie looking for imperfections or remarking on how it's a pretty good digital likeness, and that just takes you out of the story. Even if the CGI for Paul Walker is perfect, you'll be more focused on the technical marvel of the recreation rather than the character and the plot. Well then, I suppose it's probably just as well that character and plot are elements that generally the Fast and Furious franchise isn't exactly known for. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Should Paul Walker be brought back digitally to play Brian O'Connor for yet another one last ride? Now, for sure, bringing back the character of Brian O'Connor does help with closure for the series. It brings things full circle. But, in that respect, why not just recast the character with a different actor? Bring in somebody else to fulfill the role. I think possibly you could argue that it's too late to do something like that at this point. The character is too established with Paul Walker. I don't know if many people in the fan base would accept anyone else in the role of Brian other than Paul Walker. And I think it has to be said that it's quite rare, actually, that digital recreations of people are really that convincing. For example, the CGI Ian Holm was very bad in Alien Romulus recently. So much so that after receiving complaints for how bad it was, it had to be improved a little bit for the home release. So the last thing you want in this regard is for the CG to do the actor, their performance, and the character a big disservice. Now, having said that, I think the CG for him in number 7 was generally quite good. His CG likeness was generally pretty good, and it worked. And I can understand that they couldn't just, recast halfway through the movie. He had filmed half of his scenes. And so to use CGI to complete the film, I think they did it in a way that was respectful and I think served the character very well. And generally fans were pleased with that tribute and send off to Paul Walker. Number 7 was a film he was intending to be part of. Okay, he can't consent to being in number 11. And so in that respect, I think the dead should be allowed to rest, in my opinion. Or at least if you're going to bring the character back, bring in a different actor. But regardless of what I think, this kind of thing, using CG to bring actors back from the dead, it's going to keep happening in the future. That's just the reality. And hopefully the technology is so good by then that when they do it, a respectful and, perfect, seamless recreation can be done. But getting back to the 11th Fast and Furious film, I think it's probably best to put the story to bed and move on from the 10th film. It wasn't exactly a strong story to begin with. I think they should focus on making a decent final standalone film that goes back to the franchise roots. And this does seem to be what Vin Diesel wants. So keep the story simple and grounded as much as possible. If they do genuinely want to go back and do this street racing stuff, then I think that could definitely serve as a fitting farewell and a great throwback to the first film, back to where it all began, back to the roots. And so getting back to the cars and the driving and the speed, rather than trying to be a substandard Mission Impossible knockoff franchise. And also keep the main cast relatively small. And for the racing, try to film as much of the action set pieces practically rather than relying on, big green screen heavy studio work. So anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on this one. Thanks very much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell to be notified of future updates on the channel. Hit that like button, share this video out there. Take care, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.